Bullies shamed the new teacher during attendance. Minutes later, they all wished they hadn't. The school bell had just sounded when every student at Ridgeway High went completely still. Their new teacher stood before them, gripping the ripped material of her top, shame blazing across her face. The cackling of three well-known tormentors bounced off the classroom walls, loud, vicious, and without mercy. But not a single person anticipated what was about to unfold, because that seemingly fragile educator carried a history none of them could have ever pictured. And within the next 60 minutes, those very same bullies who had ridiculed her would find themselves on their knees, desperately pleading for her forgiveness. The early morning sun sliced through the Venetian blinds as Ms. Elena Reyes positioned herself anxiously at the front of her brand new class. This was her very first day on the job at Ridgeway High, a school recognized not for its academic achievements but for its troublesome students. At 28 years old, Elena carried herself with a quiet elegance. Her clothing was modest, her voice gentle, and her smile inviting, yet behind those composed eyes existed a story filled with profound suffering. She wasn't here merely to instruct English. She was here to piece her life back together. Her history was something she kept entirely private. A devastating loss had compelled her to abandon her former existence. Her husband, a military serviceman, had been killed in an ambush on foreign soil, leaving her completely destroyed. For months on end, she couldn't form words, couldn't bring herself to eat, couldn't even step outside her apartment door. Then one morning, her gaze fell upon an old handwritten note he had left behind. "Keep teaching the world kindness, Elena, even when it forgets what kindness means." That single letter had pulled her back from the edge. And so here she stood, prepared to begin again, even though her heart remained delicate and bruised. As she started reading through the attendance list, snickering erupted from the rear of the room. A lanky boy with tattoos hidden beneath his sleeves, Derek, the school's most infamous troublemaker, reclined lazily in his seat wearing a scornful smirk. Flanking him were his two ever-present sidekicks, Ryan and Kurt, both celebrated for cutting classes and driving teachers to resign. "Yo, new teacher," Derek taunted. "You lost or something? The kindergarten's next door." The classroom burst into laughter. Elena drew a steady breath. "Good morning, Derek. I'm glad you're here. Let's begin with attendance." Before she could even finish her sentence, Ryan launched a rubber band at her. It struck her sleeve and she winced. The room howled with amusement once more. Still, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't issue punishment. She simply stated, "I hope we can begin this year with mutual respect. You'll discover I'm not so easily intimidated." But her composure only intensified their nastiness. They weren't accustomed to measured, calm responses. They fed off emotional reactions. By the third day, their harassment had escalated significantly. They sketched mocking cartoons of her on the whiteboard, made fun of her accent, and even swiped her lesson plans right off her desk. Yet Elena never broke until that fateful Friday morning when everything shifted. During attendance, Derek made a brazen wager with his companions. "Watch this," he murmured under his breath. "Let's see how long before she walks out just like the last one." He rose from his seat pretending to respond to one of her questions, then as she walked past his desk, he grabbed the sleeve of her blouse and yanked it. The fabric tore cleanly along the seam. The entire room went deathly silent. The sound of the ripping cloth was sharp enough to reverberate off the walls. Elena stood frozen, clutching her torn shirt against her chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. Humiliation seared across her face. Every single student sat motionless. Nobody laughed this time. Even the bullies hadn't expected things to escalate that far. "Miss Reyes," Derek started, but she said nothing at all. She simply turned and walked out of the classroom without uttering a single word. The principal summoned her to his office, but Elena declined to file any formal complaint. "I don't want them expelled," she said quietly. "I just want them to understand what genuine strength truly looks like." Nobody grasped what she meant by that, but they were about to find out. That very afternoon, an announcement was broadcast throughout the school. Every senior student was instructed to report to the gymnasium for a special physical education session led by a guest instructor. When the students filed in, they stopped dead in their tracks. Standing in the middle of the gym floor, dressed head to toe in professional tactical fitness gear, was Ms. Reyes, the exact same teacher they had humiliated just hours earlier. The very same woman they had dismissed as weak. The principal introduced her with a beam of pride. "Students, allow me to present Sergeant Elena Reyes, former Army Close Quarters Combat Instructor. She will be directing your self-defense training module for this entire semester." Every jaw in the gymnasium hit the floor. Even Derek's cocky grin dissolved instantly. The room hummed with stunned whispers. Ryan leaned toward Derek. "No way, that's her." Kurt swallowed hard. She's military." Ms. Reyes turned to face them all, her voice steady but razor sharp. "All right, class, let's find out what you're made of. Who'd like to volunteer first?" Nobody budged an inch. She offered a slight smile. "Derek, how about you? You're clearly confident. I appreciate that quality." The entire gymnasium pivoted toward him. He stood up slowly, attempting to mask his unease with a forced chuckle. Sure, why not?" He sauntered onto the mat, doing his best to project bravado. "Go easy on me, teach." Elena gave a measured nod. "Of course." Within mere seconds, she executed a defensive grappling technique, a precise, efficient move that harnessed Derek's own momentum and force against him. In one fluid, seamless motion, she twisted his arm and flipped him cleanly over her shoulder onto the mat. The entire class let out a collective gasp. Derek landed safely, cushioned by the mat, but the look of utter shock plastered across his face communicated everything words could not. Ms. Reyes extended her hand and pulled him back to his feet. "That is how true strength operates," she said softly. "It isn't about inflicting pain on others, it's about safeguarding what truly matters." Then she surveyed the faces around the room. "I know some of you carry deep anger toward the world. You conceal it behind humor, behind cruelty, behind arrogance. I used to train soldiers who behaved exactly the same way. They believed that hurting others proved their power until they discovered that compassion is what made them truly unbreakable." Her words landed with more force than any textbook lesson ever could. Ryan dropped his gaze to the floor. Kurt shifted his weight uncomfortably from foot to foot. Even Derek couldn't bring himself to look her in the eye. After the session concluded, Derek hung back. He approached her with his head bowed low. "Ms. Reyes, I'm sorry for all of it, everything." Ryan stepped forward beside him. "We had no idea what you'd gone through, we didn't stop to think." Elena smiled warmly. "It's all right, what matters most is that you've learned something today. Don't let guilt weigh you down, channel it into becoming better." She paused, her eyes beginning to glisten with unshed tears. "You know, the very last thing my husband ever said to me was that kindness is courage in its most undiluted form. Perhaps today you've each absorbed a small piece of that truth as well." From that day onward, everything at Ridgeway High transformed. The very same bullies who had once ridiculed and tormented her became her most devoted and hardworking students. They began helping their peers, standing up against cruelty whenever they witnessed it, and even spearheaded a charity fundraiser held in her late husband's honor. By the close of the school year, at the graduation ceremony months later, Derek took the podium to deliver a speech. "She didn't just teach us how to defend ourselves physically," he declared. "She taught us what it truly means to fight for something good." The entire audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause, but Elena didn't shed a tear. She simply smiled, tilting her face gently upward as though whispering to her late husband somewhere above, "I kept teaching kindness, just like you asked."